Introduce myself. Okay, so yeah, I mean, you said it. So I've been always fascinated with the science of let's say biology and biochemistry of this planet. So I've done in my career. I started on microbial biotechnology, synthetic biology, on engineering bacteria and viruses, and I founded my first company based on that, on synthetic biology, focused on sustainable kind of developments, but also about the way our bodies work, the kind of human biochemistry. Ever since discovery of genome, we thought like we've uncovered the holy grail, but it turns out it's a way more complex story than that. And so the kind of unciphering or uncovering like what makes things work and how we can kind of contribute to exploiting these evolutionary stories in the way to make our lives great, our environment great, etc. And so as an entrepreneur, I've also been on this path. Kind of when I started in my industrial, let's say, synthetic biology field, the focus was using bacteria to solve environmental issues, right? So using waste streams, waste resources to, then bring into kind of bacterial engineering into that, use their power of their genetics to kind of create high value molecules, materials, energies, and so on, right? The same goes then for, us. I've started kind of deeper dive into human biology, more in kind of traditional drug discovery. So I was working on developing drugs for, rare diseases that big pharma doesn't care about. So, again, trying to decipher our biology and help those that, kind of can have a more productive and healthy lives. But at the same time, seeing a lot of, let's say, biological fundamentals in those genetic disorders, it taught me a lot, or it taught us a lot in terms of also very similar processes that happen with us, let's say, healthy people, as our systems of repair, regeneration, recycling, and so on. So these kind of evolutionary mechanisms that are already in there genetically, that start failing, right? And that's kind of the lead into all kinds of chronic illnesses and eventually decline and aging. So my journey was always kind of, from the entrepreneurial standpoint, understanding biology and then trying to kind of use that biology to make both the environment and ourselves better. Yeah, so if we're talking short terms, like 10, 15 years, I think that there is a significant shift now happening in, let's say, the appreciation of what aging is, right? So in my, let's say, early days when I was going through my, university years, I don't know, 25 years ago or so, the world was still very much like, we can talk about the diseases of aging, so Alzheimer, Parkinson, and so on, but aging itself is more or less a taboo topic, right? So it's just something that happens. And now both the field of understanding the science of aging, so with the hallmarks or, whatever terminology we want to use there, what actually happens systemically across all species that make the cells lose that ability to repair, recycle, and so on. So this science really exploded in the last decade. And at the same time, with this push, also with terminology such as biological age and so on, and all the failures on Alzheimer, where they thought they will dissolve the amyloid plaques and so on, and they thought that will actually cure the disease, while not being aware that actually that's chronic inflammation that is actually driving the protein aggregation in the first place. So on that side, there was that push of starting to understand a lot of the science behind that, and coming into the awareness that there's a significant difference between the health span and the lifespan, right? And so while we have done a lot as a society in terms of pushing that lifespan, our mortality rates, are going higher and higher. The average is now kind of, life expectancy somewhere in the high 80s already. A lot of people can reach their 90s. But the shocking truth is that we've not done a lot in terms of health, right? So shockingly, last year, I think CDC announced the latest statistics, and it turns out that the average, which means half the people are actually below that, right? So the average onset of age-related decline, the age-related illnesses and chronic diseases starts at 51, right? And so if the average or the expected life expectancy is 80-something, we live more than 30 years in chronic disease state, right? So I think this is really where the first wave is coming, right? So the first appreciation of longevity is not that much about lifespan, but it's more about how can we apply the recent discoveries in terms of diagnostics, science, genes, microbes, all the stuff around nutrition and so on, precision medicine, etc., to start improving the preventive, right? Improving the diagnostics, improving the personalization, precision medicine, and so on, and thereby really improving the quality of life for significantly longer. I do believe, however, that after a certain amount of time, we get into a next phase of the story where a true regenerative medicine comes along, right? So we've seen a lot of just crazy stuff happening in the lab in terms of not just in vitro in cells, but even in vivo, like, adopting CRISPR technologies and stem cells. And, we can 3D print organs already by now in the lab, right? So there's so much coming from the lab to, clinics and then later into, actual use that I think is going to be a fantastic or phenomenal future ahead of us. But when talking about 10, 15 years, I think it's mainly really kind of translating this awareness of health span versus lifespan, of focusing on public policies, of starting to say, let's even maybe promote a little bit more diagnostics, prevention, and precision rather than just, awarding huge financial success to pharmaceutical companies who just develop drugs to kind of address the symptoms, right? So always go for pathologies that already develop, right? We have very little incentive to actually keeping people healthy, right? So I think that's going to be a major shift relatively soon. Yeah, well, it kind of refers already to the question, to the answer I've just given. So, yes, indeed, I think that's already happening. I think that's already, there is a significant movement in that direction. There's an increasing public awareness. There is a decade ago, nobody knew what longevity is, right? Or health span, for that matter. It's a new coined word. Now everybody talks about it. I mean, it's becoming a common topic of discussions, and even otherwise. I mean, I'm seeing it with my kids when they go through schools. Right, they are already being really educated on healthy diets or unhealthy diets. Problems of stress, smoking, all these kind of things, etc. Right. So, but there's also a huge effort in terms of course, what we've been having with the climate change, etc., is about sustainability, environment, and so on, right? So both kind of human health and planetary health are becoming a big component of the education system already. I'm already seeing that, maybe not everywhere, but at least in some places it is already, strongly coming into curriculum. Governments are talking about health span. It's not, I think that the legislation is still behind. So I think that there's still a lot to be done in terms of regulatory field in Europe. And it's going to be a mess because we have so many different countries with so many different interests. But I think that the first important move will be to move into precision medicine. Yeah. So that we stop treating that everything needs to be, one size fits all because it's fair, right? It's a problem because, of course, we have to be careful about discrimination then, etc. But it doesn't, one thing doesn't fit all. One diet doesn't fit all. One drug doesn't fit all. It's very, very unique based on your biology, what it will actually be helpful or harmful or, just no effect, right? So, Yeah, so again, to your point, I think change is happening in some areas faster than others. But because there is now such a strong public awareness of that, I think also the politics is actually going to be forced that the move towards promoting true health. So sometimes I wouldn't call it a joke, but we kind of address our current industry really as sick care, to be honest, yeah, because what we do as an industry, as even when you think about reimbursements and insurance and health policies, is when people get sick, then you get help, right? Then we take care of you, like we give you drugs or whatever, right? But first you need to get sick, right? We do very little to actually prevent that, right? So, but again, with that public awareness and with all these kind of discussions, I think that will be a significant movement over the next decade, yeah. What we did with NU was, I think we're one of the first companies actually to really tackle this problem of trying to integrate this complex biology that we are, right? Because there's been, for a long time, there's been, quite trendy doing, genetic tests or, since recent years, microbiome tests. People have been doing blood testing for decades, etc., usually through, their GPs, etc. But it's always looking through a keyhole, right? So your genome is just your blueprint, right? It's your, let's say, potential, right? What you were given by your parents. But what actually gets expressed, how those genes then actually, create your body is so much more influenced by your environment, by your diet, by, basically the whole journey that you take in terms of, let's say, giving that ecosystem that creates your current state. I mean, we know from the studies of genetical twins, right? I mean, one can be a couch potato, the other one an athlete, one is a worrying CEO, the other one is a yoga teacher, whatever. They will have completely different biologies in 10, 20, 30 years, right? So genetics doesn't tell us everything, right? It tells us just certain aspect of what your cells can do. And then there's the microbiome, right? If you look at the human body, we have, give or take, roughly 10 trillion cells. Everyone has the same 20,000, give or take genes. But then we have, nearly 100 trillion microbial, cells in there with, again, give or take, depending on your diversity, nearly 50 million additional genes, right? So microbiome is a hugely important contributor. We learn every month new papers are coming out, gut-brain connection, inflammation, all these kind of things, right? But at the same time, it's also your, how would you say, it's part of your journey, right? So you change your diet, you change your environment, you change your exercise, stress, and so on, your microbiome will change. And also your microbiome will largely influence what you like, your appetites, your habits, and so on, right? So again, without knowing your microbiome, you're half blind, but just the microbiome is only just a small component, right? The same goes for blood, right? And so on and so forth, right? So what we try to do with NU is, take all of these data, really understand who you are. What's your potential? What has been your journey until now? What's your trajectory moving forward if you're burning the candle the same way as you are, right? What's your epigenetic story telling us, and so on. And then trying to see kind of where we can start optimizing that towards really kind of a better health and performance. And then when you say like, how can that really impact health or life, right? So of course, when we look at a healthy individual, right, you're preventing, you're preventing decline, you're, let's say, resetting or pushing back your biological age and your clocks or whatever, right? You're optimizing your performance, your regeneration and muscle and so on, right? But then when you have genetics which is maybe just slightly suboptimal, right? Take for example an MTHFR pathway or things like that, right? Where your methylation is not as efficient. That can have a significant impact on your hormonal balances, your dopamine, serotonin, melatonin pathways. Your anxiety goes up and down and up and down, and you have all these kind of stress things. And then you say, well, that's just me, right? That's who I am. in a way, yes, that's your genetics, right? But also the swings and the instabilities, because there's certain enzymes that are just slightly deprived of certain cofactor that they need, right? So if you can provide precision supplementation, if you can provide those precision interventions, you can buffer out those mood swings and create a much, much, much more, kind of stable quality of life, right? So it's not just that, preventive health and or peak performance and so on, but it's even on a very fundamental level, you can very much fine-tune your biology. Yeah? Yeah, so new is actually very new company. We've been working on this for quite a number of years, to be honest. So it's been in the works for, I would say, 4 or 5 years of engineering and all the tech behind, etc. It's a significant team of medical doctors, bioinformaticians, microbiologists, data scientists, AI engineers, and so on, right? But it takes a long time to build something as complex, right? So we've just started to launch in the Netherlands, the UK. There's a small kind of pilot team also here in Slovenia where we're currently having this discussion. So the company really has just now starting to come out of the stealth mode. We've been working very closely with pilot groups in the past, with who've had access to the platform, who have been taking precision supplementations and so on. I must say results are stunning, right? So people report, we've seen it in the data. Almost everybody has been reducing their biological age, the epigenetic age, the microbiome age, and so on. Which is quite fun to see. People have been reporting also kind of positive effects in terms of their mood and performance. We've seen elderly people, for example, ladies in their menopause, actually having significant change in their kind of overall energy and hormonal cycles again. Kind of complete kind of reset of their biology. Actually at a very late stage. Yeah. So, but across the spectrum, from young to old, we've seen a very, very positive impact. As a company, when you talk about profitability, these kind of companies take a while, right? So it's a heavy investment, it's a lot of tech, but we want to bring something, we hear I said, we've been working on this for many years, right? But now in the last couple of years, there are news are coming out of people like Brian Johnson or things, entrepreneurs like that, spending millions of euros on their biohacking, right? Mm-hmm. What we're doing here with New is actually we democratize that, right? We use a lot of these kind of deep technology, and machine learning and so on, and actually a very good platform to actually make that affordable to kind of almost every individual. Yeah. So that's kind of the idea behind the platform. And the road to profitability is, of course, there's a certain roadmap, but that's not the primary concern right now for us. Yeah, so I think it goes back to one of the earlier comments. We in our current society, an average person will live 30 years in chronic pain, right? And it's such a shame, right? And it's almost irresponsible of us not to be able to bring the knowledge and the science that we've been generating over the last decades to empower people to actually really understand their biology and to be able to prevent that decline, prevent that chronic illness, right? And have a much more meaningful, productive, long life, right? And whether that's for your own egotistical reasons, for wanting to enjoy the planet for longer, contribute to the society, be with your grandkids or whatever. But I think that really is the most meaningful part of it. Of course, it's also going to come into precision sports, so that eventually you squeeze even more the top 5% human ability, etc. But I think that's it's nice, but I think this is way more meaningful. Right now, as humanity, we live in a chronic pain and illness for nearly 3 decades of our lives, and I think that's really something that we should not allow for it to be. Yeah. So I think that that will be difficult, right? Because unfortunately, as you know, human beings, we are, you know, I mean, you ask yourself, you know, how you convince a skeptic? We are skeptics, right? Oh. So unless this does have that medical stamp of approval, the clinical validation, that the regulatory comes in, you know, the insurance steps in and so on, they say like this is really something worth, you know, pushing forward. I mean, there will always be early adopters, but I think it does need to come from kind of this overall, let's say, synchronized activity, both from tech as well as from governments. I mean, you know, look at what happened in any kind of tech industry, right? You look at, you know, what Elon Musk did with, you know, electric vehicles. It was, you know, an industry driven initiative, or Uber with, you know, taxis, or, you know, now we're seeing satellites with Starlinks and so on. These are tech-driven initiatives. People want to see sustainability. They want to see, you know, a smaller impact on the planet. They want to see, you know, I'm seeing even longevity as a sustainable kind of initiative as well, because, you know, we become more aware of our presence in the world. We're less kind of, you know, you just have those maybe 2 decades of consumerism where you just buy and waste, and then you are retired and out anyway. So you know, it's a people-driven initiative, but without the support of, you know, the policies, the, you know, regulation, the, let's say, medical and so on, it's going to be difficult to really get across. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, that's an interesting question. It's hard to say. I mean, it's really hard to say. I've got a history of scientists in my family, but they've been mainly physicists, for example, right? And very naively, I thought, you know, going through my high school, that, you know, there's been, you know, almost everything that there is to discover in physics has been discovered, right? And a lot of very smart people have said that before in the past and have been so wrong, right? And we know now in physics so much is still unknown and undiscovered, and, you know, just we're completely blind to a big chunk of what the universe actually is, etc., right? But anyway, as a young kid, you know, I was like, okay, I'm definitely very interested in you know, how the world works, right? But it was kind of the time where, you know, DNA just really, you know, has been deciphered, and we were starting to kind of really see the first, you know, kind of beyond the I don't know, cheese and you know, beer production in terms of microbes, right? The first kind of microbial biotechnologies coming alive, etc., right? So for me, that was really the kind of the next, you know, frontier to go into, right? And the more I was there, the more I was, you know, from, like we discussed at the beginning, you know, from initially the power of microbes, then learning about, you know, the human biology and how much is still unknown and how these things are interconnected and etc. So it was just a stepwise evolution, I would say, not like a one particular trigger. How the world works. Yeah, no, I think you know, what we're currently doing in this last decade in terms of, you know, unifying the understanding of the aging processes and the driving factors behind chronic inflammation, right? Behind lots of cancers, behind, you know, lots of cardiovascular issues. Why do cells stop regenerating, right? Why are there senescent cells that don't want to go away? Why proteins no longer refold or recycle, right? Why autophagy and mitophagy and so on become less efficient? All of these things are becoming so, let's say, you know, they used to be such a mystery in the past, that I think we're really, I mean, I'm you know, absolutely amazed almost every day in terms of how much of this understanding of our complex biology is being unraveled in front of us almost every day, right? There is another frontier, you know, there's something that we are still completely kind of in the dark, is you know, this, right? So the cognitive part, right? We have no idea where this conversation is coming from, and the questions and the thoughts and the, so this is, you know, this is one thing that is maybe for the tomorrow's science. But in terms of the fundamental biology and the biochemistry, it's been absolutely how do you say, a groundbreaking kind of change from the kind of early discoveries of the genome into knowing the fundamentals of cellular machinery of today. Yeah, so I think it's been a big progress. So I can maybe say that if we're talking about the Czech audience, yeah. I mentioned earlier that NU has launched in the Netherlands and UK and so on, but NU also has a global kind of product, right? So if people are interested, they can also sign up at NU. There is the ability to test your genome, your microbiome, your epigenome anywhere in the world. So you get a test kit directly from NU, and all of that science can be done. And then people can still actually get the whole insights. For example, if you have your own blood test in your different countries, etc., you can then upload that, and all of that gets then crunched together into your digital twin, and you can get all the same insights, right? So even though as a platform, we kind of open up country by country in terms of where we can also offer blood testing. But for example, if people make just a slightly more effort on their side, and they can actually get their blood tested at their local GP or whatever infrastructure is in different countries, the platform is actually available globally, so anybody can sign up. From Middle East, from Far East, even from Singapore, from South America, from North America. So people are signing up from all over the place. But yes, true. Mostly, of course, because also there's more of a local presence and promotion. Mostly, it's the Dutch and British citizens. Yeah. Well, I try to follow the science. So no, but it's a very diverse. Yeah. So I'm a big believer in a way the kind of evolutionary aspect of the cellular machinery, right? So the cells have this kind of very complex system of nutrition, right? So we get carbs, we get proteins, we get fats and so on, and all of these genes, all of these mechanisms are continuously expressed with our normal lifestyles, right? But what happens is that, in reality, if we continuously feed all of these pathways, we can really kind of impair the ability of cell to detect if there is something wrong, right? So in terms of diet, I tend to do, for a while I'm on a kind of just nice and healthy Mediterranean style diet, but then I switch. It's called metabolic flexibility. I switch for a certain amount of time on keto. It's mainly pure fat and protein. Then for a while it's really very high protein and very high resistant training, muscle and so on, to kind of activate your growth hormones, and muscles, prevent sarcopenia, build bones, etc. Then it's a fasting period. You allow your body to, reset, recycle, calm down, and so on. So you allow your body to kind of continuously adapt and repair and be stimulated. I'm a big believer also in hormetic stress. So for example, we shouldn't always be too comfortable. So hormetic stress doesn't mean stress at work, but it means being exposed to cold, being exposed to heat, having intensity of environment around your body, etc. So it gives it triggers those kind of adaptive responsive mechanisms to say, well, I either survive or I die. So anything that is not functioning optimally should just kind of get out of the way, right? So in terms of supplementation, we have about 70 different ingredients that are kind of mixed from morning till evening, catching my circadian rhythm, which things are fine tuning and balancing. But it's a complex routine, but it's fun because it just makes me really all the time in, let's say, in a very good state and active shape.
Perfect.
And that's something that you get through the platform, of course.
Yeah.